off mute, everybody's back on. Okay, what I understand, and I'll repeat myself early on, we may have, just so everyone's clear remotely, okay. So at this junction, we were gonna bring the jury back in, and the reminder, if anytime anybody needs anything at all, please let the court know. The court's more than glad to assist anyone at any particular time. Marshall, would you mind getting our jurors in? Thank you so much.
Your Honor, I need to just run to get my binder. I left a binder out there. May I do that?
Oh, yeah,
I'll
of
be in
course.
ahead of
Do you mind if the marshal
Not
starts
at
with
all.
the jurors? Okay.
Not at all.
Okay, then we'll multitask, of course. Like I said, we already told the jurors that people will be walking in and out, and then to completely disregard that, so everyone should be good with that. And everybody understands the general spacing on where you're going to stay. We do appreciate it. That was a general to everyone, so that everyone understands. Sometimes during the lunch, people are enjoying their lunch so relaxed that they kind of forget some of the things, and so everyone can appreciate the support. Different aspects. Okay, so the jury should be coming back in just a second.
Mr. Kemp, is your microphone? Could you just turn it on? Okay. Since I couldn't hear you.
All rise for the jury, please. Come on in, folks. The honor all members of the jury are present. Everyone, please be seated.
Okay, do appreciate it. Thanks very much. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hope everyone had a nice, relaxing lunch. Should mention, and oftentimes I just walk through what's on that cart in case any of the jurors need it, so I'll just give you a heads up. Is you probably have already noticed so during voir dire we have the 2 pitchers of water. We've got cups. We're more than glad to get you more cups. We already talked about the pens earlier today. Hearing assisted devices, if anyone needs that, those are actually in a different location. I don't think anyone needed any footstools, and so if you do, let us know, because we have footstools, and like I said, we do have the hearing assisted devices, more than glad to do so. Oftentimes we have antibacterial, sometimes people like that, so we have it there just in case you all want it. And on the second shelf, sometimes people want gloves, so we try and provide you gloves. The black ones are latex free in case anybody has a latex allergy. The blue ones are not latex free. And usually we have over there like a box of masks. Sometimes people want to use masks and sometimes people don't, and sometimes bring their own, so it's fine. So we just have those just if any of the jurors wanted. I don't know if you knew that you were welcome to help yourselves if you needed any of those things, so I wanted to do that. And so that's all good, and then we should have tissue boxes on each of the sides as well, and then just general wipes as well if anybody needs that. So hopefully I get you as comfortable as possible while we continue with opening statements and go into all of our witnesses. So counsel for plaintiff, would you like to continue with your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you very much.
Feel free to proceed.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
I would like to go back to one point I made quickly.
Mr. Cochran, may we please have the doc cam?
Oh, I apologize.
Thank you.
So again, this is Mr. Marlowe. He's the inventor. We expect him to come here live. Skip over to the second part of this, please, Shane. Okay, so I told you before he did safety studies on himself. No, Jake.
That space. I'm trying to get it where it needs to be, and I'm stuck, so I apologize.
Hold on a second. Our doc cam's still at lunch, so it'll be on in a moment. Remember, this is fiscally conservative,
Sorry.
using your tax dollars, which means we have older equipment. It takes a little bit of time to warm up, okay? Thinks it's already the weekend, even though it's only Thursday afternoon, so just a second. You get to see the beautiful shield for the state of Nevada.
That was me, but it is stuck, so.
I was blaming it on the equipment.
I know.
Okay, our wonderful court recorder is now down to 99.997% perfect. Lost 100th of a
There you
point.
go.
Okay, go
Sorry.
ahead, counsel.
Okay.
Hold a second, you're set, go ahead.
Okay. All right, let me get this quick. So I said that Real Water didn't do any safety tests, and what I meant by that is there's a test called mass I know some of the jurors know what I'm talking about. But anyway, those are the kind of tests I'm talking about. They would have cost about $200 to do at the beginning of the product run. And if they had done those tests for $200, they would have detected the hydrogen. Didn't do any tests like that. Now, I don't want to confuse that type of testing with these standard bacteria tests that you always hear about, because they did do bacteria tests on a weekly basis. So I'm not contending they didn't do that, but they didn't do this appropriate test. So now let's turn to damages. So the verdict form is going to have a spot in it where you fill out the damages for each one of the plaintiffs. That's the primary issue in the case. So we already talked about the liver transplant operation. I want to start with Jasmine. Let's flip over Jasmine. So Jasmine, again, who's over there, she had her liver function test really high. You remember ALT, let's go back, Shane. Let's try to drill this in. ALT, the top range of normal is 78. AST, the top range is 27. So remember I had that backwards. So let's try to remember that. Take a look at what happened to Jasmine. So they get her in there. Next one's Shane. Next one. So here her liver function test. So ALT, I'm starting to get confused already. It was 27 and 78, but look how high hers are. Next, Shane. So they actually did a liver biopsy on her. And what that means is they took a 16 gauge needle and they stuck it in her and they took a sample of the liver. They removed the sample of liver, they sent it to a lab for analysis, and they found out in the lab that she had been exposed to some sort of toxin. They didn't know about hydrogen at this time, but they found out some sort of toxin, which is drug-related liver injury. Usually, they don't do liver biopsies like this. That's pretty unusual. And the reason they did it in this case is because they were so concerned about those ALT, AST levels. Next, please. Tina was in the hospital for 8 days. Again, these are her liver function tests. She went to a different hospital than Jasmine, Centennial Hills. Next. So she had a bad case of what I talked about before, the brain swelling or the encephalopathy. Okay? So if you take a look at the next line, go back to metabolic induced psychosis. So what happens is your brain swells up and you get psychosis. All right, next shade. So she got agitated, she's paranoid, she's thinking people are trying to kill her. This is all because the toxins were not cleaned out by the liver. They got into her brain, and this is the reaction she got. This is from the hospital records. This is what hospital staff recorded. She thought people were listening to her, making fun of her, laughing at her. She's suspicious of every one of the doctors. She's in the hospital for 8 days. Next, please. So she starts walking up and down the hallways at night because she's so paranoid. Again, thinking people are trying to hurt her. And she had elevated liver function tests this entire time. They even started to give her neurology. See how it says psychiatric outpatient? They sent her to a psychiatrist because they were so concerned about this. So she's in the hospital for 8 whole days, but after being there about 5 days, the mentation has improved. And what that means is her thought processes are improving. She can think better again because the swelling's coming down. Okay, so the swelling's coming down. She's almost back to baseline, but not quite back. So she had a real bad experience. Next, Shane. And they counseled her that she may have to have a liver transplant operation. And again, that is the only option here. Okay, so when you see the medical bills are relatively low for this serious condition, but that's because there's nothing they can do other than the liver transplant operation. They put you in the hospital, they hope you get better. If you don't, they send you for the transplant operation. So the hospital bills are relatively low for the seriousness of this operation. For example, if you had a heart attack or something, there's all kinds of things they can do. You'd have really high hospital bills. Okay, so liver transplant operations. So let's go back and make one quick point, Jim. So I'm going to use 2 terms here when I talk about these liver transplant drugs. I'm going to call them anti-rejection drugs, because remember, you're putting a stranger's liver in your body. So, and they're also, the technical name is immunosuppressive. Okay, when the liver transplant specialist takes the stand, that's probably the term he'll use. So immunosuppressive. They are suppressing your immune system so your immune system doesn't reject the strange liver. So when I say immunosuppressive or anti-rejection drug, that's the exact same thing. Next one, Shane. Okay, this is Mrs. Brody. A little more detail on her injuries. All the classic signs of acute liver failure, everything that everybody else had. You know, the vomiting, the fatigue, you know, everything. So she went to the emergency room at the Henderson Hospital. Like I said before, they didn't test her ALT, AST, so we don't know how bad she was. We don't know whether she was better than Tina, worse than Tina, better than Jasmine, worse than Jasmine. All we know is she had acute liver failure in the hospital. Next year. And this happened for 2 or 3 months. I mean, so for 2 or 3 months, she's experiencing this. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse, and that's why the first time I think they ran her to the hospital in an ambulance from her house in the middle of the day. And the second time, I think she had one of her friends take her there. But both times, they kept her in the emergency room for 5 to 8 hours and then discharged her. Next. So, classic symptoms, I've already gone over those. Next. Okay, Christina Sosa, like I told you before, that's Mr. Parker's client. He's going to address her situation. Okay, next. So now we get to Myles and Hunwardsen. Okay, so Myles lives in Henderson. So he was in bed for 5 days. And at this point, Myles is a young gentleman who grew up here in Clark County. He's a steel worker by trade. He's one of those guys that you see bending the rods and stuff. So he's in bed for 5 straight days, won't eat. All he's doing is he's eating, drinking real water. So he has an altered mental status. Again, the brain swelling, the encephalopathy, and he's been falling. He can't even walk. Okay, next one, please. So then his mother finally insisted he go to Henderson Hospital. This is the hospital note. So he went to work, he's confused, didn't get out of bed, confused and restless, can't sleep. At the point in time, this happened in 2019, September 2019, he's 29 years old at that time. Next. So they measured his ALT and AST, and the AST is pretty high. I think Jasmine beat him, if that's the right term. But it's very high, 2492. And again, I think the high end on that was 78, and the ALT was supposed to be 27, it's 1234. So, real high, okay? Next one, please. So they did an analysis called MELD, M-E-L-D, and that is an analysis done if they think the patient is about ready to die. So they gave him a MELD of 39. It's a scale where they rate your, whether you're going to live or die. So they gave him a MELD 39, 52% mortality. This is the Henderson Hospital still. And so they agree it's acute liver failure. He's going to die, so transfer urgently to a transplant center. So like I told you before, there's no transplant center here in Clark County. You have to go out of state to get the liver transplant. Myles went to UCLA. Next one, please. This is a picture of Myles, and he was near death. When you see we're going to discuss in detail his condition in the Henderson Hospital. He was basically very close, okay? This is a picture of him when they're loading him onto the plane to fly to Los Angeles to UCLA. Okay, next, Shane. So he gets to UCLA, and they measure his liver functions over the course of time, and they're hoping he's going to go down. Because you saw some of the people, they went down, resolved themselves, but Myles didn't resolve. So you see the backup picture. You see the 9/19, that's September 20th, September 20th, 2019. And the next ones, they did 2 that day, and then the next one's September 20th, 2019. So you see he's not getting better. He's pretty much staying the same. In fact, he's getting worse if you look at his ALT. So next, Shane. So this is from the UCLA notes. He's seen and evaluated by the UCLA transplant team. And again, all these transplant centers have what they call transplant teams. When Dr. Hudson comes, he's our transplant specialist. He's the head of the transplant team in the University of Virginia. So he's going to explain the operation to you and the problems Myles is going to have. So they put Myles on the national waiting list. I told they don't have livers on the shelf ready to go. They don't have a bunch in the refrigerator. You come in, you need one, they give you one. You have to wait, and there's a bit of competition for it. So he's on the waiting list with a MELD score of status 1. That's meaning he's the highest possible status. He's not number one in the country, but he's high status. So they discuss the risks and benefits and alternative therapy with him, and they just get him ready for a liver transplant. There's no liver available. And at that point, a miracle happened for Myles. A young man in Los Angeles got killed. He was taken, they took his body to UCLA, took the liver out, and they had the liver available for transplant. So before they did the transplant, they inspected Myles' liver. Here's their remarks: pale yellow in color, a lot of doctor words, but basically this liver is shot, okay? And I have an actual picture of the liver that's coming up next. It is not upsetting, okay? I wouldn't show it to you if it was upsetting, all right? But this is Myles' actual liver when they took it out. So they took it out and they cut it in half because they want to examine it to see if there's anything unusual in it. And this is his actual liver. This is in the medical records. They're all stipulated. You'll be getting them. But this is what his actual liver looked like. As I said in the medical report, it's yellow. You remember I read the yellow? So that's basically a dead liver because livers aren't supposed to be yellow. Remember, the blood's going through the liver. A yellow liver is bad, 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 bad. Okay, so next. So now we get to the liver transplant procedure. This is not a simple operation. This is not like a heart operation that lasts 2, 3, 4 hours. You know, in a heart operation, they only have to disconnect maybe 4 valves and reconnect them. In this type of operation, there's an 8-step procedure. And these are the steps: hepatectomy. See, my dad used to be a doctor, and he probably roll over in his grave at my mispronunciation. But what that means is they prepare the patient's liver to be taken out. Then they do the donor liver preparation. Again, that's the guy who got killed. They had to prepare his liver for the transplant. Then they do an allograft implementation, arterial reconstruction, complex reconstruction, cholecystectomy, got that one right, biliary reconstruction and closure. And let me go through this one more time. A little detail, Shane, on step number 1. So these are actual steps that are in the medical records. You'll be given the UCLA liver transplant medical records, but this is step 1. So they got to take down the ligament, they got to expose the hepatic veins. And again, this is in Myles. They're doing this to Myles. And so they're getting him ready for the transplant because they can't just take his liver out, wait minutes or hours, and then put the other liver in. They've got to try to do it as fast as they can. So they have to get him ready to move it out. So this is what they do. And like I said before, Dr. Hudson, the liver transplant specialist, will be here and he'll explain all the steps in detail. Next, please. So the donor liver, we have to do the preparation of that. Not quite as much because the donor's not alive, so we can shortcut it a little bit. Next one, please. This is step 3, the allograft implantation. So this is very intense procedure. In the liver transplant team, usually they have between 12 and 16 people on the team, and usually the operations take 4 to 6 hours. Myles' operation, because we had a complication that I'll go into in a minute during the operation, lasted over the course of 2 days. Not 2 whole days, but they started on one day, they went past midnight, and they finished early in the morning hours because, like I said, there was a complication. Next, please. So this is step 4, the arterial reconstruction. So they're taking arteries out and then they're reattaching them. Very complicated operation, okay? And you see that they're having a couple problems right here, but nothing real serious. You know, it added another 60 minutes because they couldn't get the flow right, but they finally did. And again, you know, the liver's got the blood of the entire body going through it, all right? So it's not like just, you know, trying to transplant someone's artery in their arm or their leg or something like that. This is a massive transplantation. Next, please. The 5th stage. So this is the arterial reconstruction. They're hooking the arteries up to the liver. And like I said before, there's not just one. You can see that this is a pretty complicated operation. And again, Dr. Hudson will be here. He'll go through some of these steps with you. Next. So the 6th stage, they remove the gallbladder, which Myles' gallbladder was removed during the operation, so he doesn't have a gallbladder anymore. Next, please stay. Seventh stage, they're doing the biliary reconstruction. Next. Okay, here's the 8th stage. They're closing, they're stitching him up. He's done. Okay, so he's got the liver transplant. He's done. So what happens next? They get him back in the hospital. And medicine has changed over the decades. Before, they used to like you sitting in the hospital bed. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, The English Patient, where the guy sits in the hospital bed for 2 or 3 months and recovers. Now they want you to get up right away. And the reason they want you to get up right away is they're worried about your legs atrophying. So this is Myles, a day or 2 after his operation. And you can see from the rack behind him, he's got standard IVs, he's got immunosuppressive, the anti-rejection drugs, he's got a receptacle to collect fecal matter, okay? And so they're just trying to get him, and he's pretty doped up, you know? In fact, he's real doped up in this picture. But they've got him up and walking at UCLA. So this is a day or 2 after the operation. Next shape. So I told you about the immunosuppressant drugs. These are the actual drugs that Myles has to take every day, twice a day for the rest of his life. These 3 here, these 3 little small ones are anti-suppressant drugs. These 2 are anti-suppressant drugs, or excuse me, anti-rejection drugs that are immunosuppressants. Okay, I got that right? Yeah. Okay, these are magnesium pills he's got to take, and this is just a baby aspirin they make him take in the morning, but not at night. Okay, so the idea here with these immunosuppressant drugs is to keep a constant flow of this medicine. This, do we have the names here, Shane? Can you have the names? Okay, so again, you have the liver from a stranger. So your body's fighting it every day. It's in you. Next one. Body automatically attacks. Next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. Okay, so there's the name of the drugs. Mycophenolate, which is these 2, the red and blue one, and tacrolimus, which is these 3. It's also called TAC. You'll hear the term TAC a lot because they got to keep your TAC level at a certain. They do testing in your blood when you take these drugs. The testing's done usually on a weekly basis. He's got to send it to the transplant coordinator in UCLA, and the primary thing they want to check is the TAC level. Because if the TAC level gets off, that allows the body to start attacking the strange liver. So you've got to have continuous monitoring weekly for the rest of your life to make sure that the drugs are working. And you'll see there's an exhibit here that's a stipulated exhibit. Well, there was a stipulated exhibit here. Looking for my, yeah, that's it. This is a bind. This is my binder. You'll get a stipulated exhibit that has all the emails and texts between Myles and the liver center. They have to talk to him over and over and over again and recalibrate and adjust the medication. Can we see a couple of these, Shane? Okay, this is just a list of the drugs he's taken. That's the TAC on top. Then they give him some Bactrim, which is an antibacterial. And that's the magnesium. That's the big white pill I showed you. Next, Shane. Mycophenolate, that's also known as Cellcept. Same drug. It's one of the anti-rejection drugs. So you're going to hear it as mycophenolate. Sometimes they'll call it Cellcept. So that it's same drug. 2 names. One's the what do they call it? Street name, common name. Okay. Next one, Shane. Okay. So this is what I'm getting to: the continued monitoring and drug calibration. So Myles has an assigned liver transplant coordinator at UCLA, and this is his current person. It's been his person for a couple years. So her name is Alice Lee. So she is monitoring all the drug reports, and this one's just about the cost of the pills. You know, it costs $120 or $189 for 129 pills here or online. UCLA, for some reason, you can get them for $15. So Myles makes the comment here that it's cheaper for him to fly to LA once a month to fill his prescription than to get it filled online. The next one. So So this is a different transplant coordinator. She's talking about the TAC dose. Remember I said we called it TAC? So see how the TAC dose is 5.8. She doesn't like it there. So she's increasing the amount of his TAC dose so he gets more of the anti-rejection drug. So the point I'm trying to make is you don't just walk out of the hospital and you're done. All right? They have to monitor these levels for the rest of your life. Next one, Shane. Now, when you get other medical procedures, you have to tell the liver transplant team because they want to make sure that anything you're getting doesn't interfere with the anti-rejection drugs. So he's going to the dentist, so so he has to clear with Alice Lee here about the antibiotics. Next one. They thought the TAC level was high, so they wanted to decrease it, so they're decreasing the dosage. I mean, this is after this is 2020, the transplant's in 2019. So they're concerned that the liver function tests seem to be going up slightly. Next, please. This one, you even have to talk to them about if you're going to try to take some healthy foods to get the immune system. So Myles is kind of a health food nut in a nice way, okay? And so he wanted to try these new things, and so he had to clear it first with the liver transplant center because they would know he doesn't. Next one. So Myles wants to decrease the TAC. He doesn't want to take as much because it causes, serious side effects, right? But they can't let him do it because they don't want to reduce the dose to get the liver rejected. Next one. So here we are in April 2022, which is like 16 months after the operation. They're still talking about Myles was working out of town. He had trouble getting his anti-rejection drugs, so he missed a couple doses, and boom, liver enzymes go back up. And so this is the concern they have. You've got to get him down, and so they increase the TAC, and they want additional labs, more liver function tests to keep monitoring this. Next one, Shane. All right. When you take liver suppression drugs, or excuse me, anti-rejection drugs, immunosuppression drugs, it is a very small pill, very small. It is a very powerful drug. So unfortunately, it has other consequences than just fighting the strange liver. One of the consequences is skin cancer. So Dr. Hudson is going to tell you that liver transplant people are advised to try to stay out of direct sunlight, which is not the easiest thing to do here in Nevada, because they're going to get skin cancer. And it is more likely than not that Myles will develop skin cancer probably more than once in the rest of his life. But this is from the UCLA medical bill records where they specifically say that the immunosuppression drugs put you at the high risk for skin cancer. And again, that's the cell section TAC that I just showed you. So you have to go to the dermatologist every year for a skin check. All right, now what does that mean? That doesn't mean you hold out your hand and they go, oh, it looks good. No, they strip you down all the way. You are totally naked, and then you are totally naked. You have nothing covering your private parts, nothing. And they inspect you from top to bottom to make sure there's not skin cancer because they want to get an eye on or a handle on it. So he's got this examination once a year. Next one. Another problem from these anti-rejection drugs is they cause high blood pressure. And you'll see this in the medical records. And when you get high blood pressure, you have cardiac events. Cardiac events covers a wide range of problems, okay? So we are not saying Myles more likely than not is going to have a heart attack, but he is more likely than not going to have high blood pressure, and that's a potential risk. So you've got to take the drugs every day of your life, twice a day, but these are the consequences. Next one, Shane. Another problem with these anti-rejection drugs is they accelerate your bone density deterioration. And what I mean by that is when people get older, you've heard about widow's back, older women, they kind of bend over a little bit because they're losing their bone density. So when people get older, they lose their bone density naturally. Myles is losing his bone density at a rapid rate. And there's going to be a time where they totally prohibit him from doing any type of physical activity because they're afraid afraid he's gonna break some bones. But so this is another problem. So to monitor this, he has to do periodic bone density tests. They go in and they actually measure his bone density. So that's another problem. The next problem, renal insufficiency. So he has kidney problems. Now, I'm not saying he's gonna have to have a kidney transplant, don't get me wrong, but the doctor is gonna say it's more likely than not that he has kidney problems. Okay? So, another problem. And now let's turn to some of the bigger problems. Next, Jane. If you take anti-rejection drugs, immunosuppressants, and you are a man or woman, your potential offspring can have birth defects. Severe birth defects. Before the liver transplant, Myles had a dream. He wanted to find the perfect woman, get married, and have children. That is not an option anymore. Because in order to ensure that any baby you have does not have birth defects, you have to quit taking these anti-rejection drugs for 4 to 6 months. So if you quit taking the anti-rejection drugs for 4 to 6 months, you're allowing the body to attack the strange liver. And if you lose that strange liver, they're not going to give you another one. All right, so this is the warning that they give. So if you do get married, or if you were already married, and the female partner is able to get pregnant, they recommend birth control before and during treatment with that's tacrolimus again. That's the TAC I've been referring to. So you've got to talk to the healthcare provider about this. Myles is not married. He's going to tell you candidly, he's afraid to even date because how's he going to explain this situation to anybody? Next, please. This is, I think, the worst impact of the anti-rejection drugs. They put the strange liver in. It saved Myles' life. Without a doubt, he would have been dead if they hadn't done the liver transplant. So it was a good thing. But he doesn't get his full life. So here is, I'm trying to do a timeline for you. Myles was born on September 8th, 1990. The date of the liver transplant was September 23rd, 2019. This is Dr. Alcina's life expectancy. Dr. Alcina is a liver transplant expert hired by Real Water. He's not my liver transplant expert. He's the defendant's liver transplant expert. So he actually says 15 to 20 years after the transplant for Myles. I have taken it out to the outer range that he gave, the 20 years. So according to Dr. Alcina, more likely than not, Myles is going to die 20 years after the transplant, which would put his death in 2039. Okay, our doctor, and this is, right now if you use the life expectancy tables, they'll be admitted into evidence for you. Right now, Myles has a life expectancy of 77 years. So if he dies in 2039, they have stolen 29 years of life from him. Okay, that's their expert. This is our expert, Dr. Hudson. He gives a rough estimate of 30 years. He's a little more optimistic than the defense expert. Usually it's the other way around. But our expert is giving Myles more time. Okay, and I really sincerely hope our expert's right. So if our expert's right, Myles is going to lose 19 years of life, not 29. But this is probably the most difficult decision you're going to have in the case, ladies and gentlemen. What are the appropriate compensatory damages for someone who loses 19, 24, 29 years of life? That's going to be your decision. Okay? Next sheet. So just summing up Myles' damages elements. He had the liver transplant, the anti-rejection drugs, also called immunosuppressant for life, twice, takes one in the morning, one at night. Continued monitoring, that's the UCLA transplant coordinator. Skin cancer caused by the anti-rejection drugs. High blood pressure, cardiac events caused by the anti-rejection drugs. Bone density deterioration, the bone density testing, the kidney problems, and then the lost lifespan, which I think is the big one. So, just summing up all the compensatory damages points for everybody. So, Real Water had hydrazine in it, a rocket fuel. It had rocket fuel in it. Hydrazine causes acute liver failure. That's what caused the acute liver failure for the 5 plaintiffs in this case. All of the plaintiffs got acute liver failure. One of the plaintiffs, Myles, had the liver transplant that we've gone through. And 3 of the other plaintiffs were taken to emergency rooms or intensive care. Okay? And the only treatment option for acute liver failure is wait, if it gets better, keep you in the hospital for 8 days like they did Tina, and just pray it gets better, or do the liver transplant. So 4 of the plaintiffs got better, 1 didn't, 1 had a liver transplant. And I think that concludes my presentation, right, Shane? Am I done? Thank you very much for your attention. I won't get to speak to you again till the closing argument. I will be doing some of the witnesses, and I will turn the floor to Mr. Parker. It's always better to go before Mr. Parker, not after Mr. Parker.
Okay. Counsel, Mr. Parker, would you like to commence with your opening statement?
We can, Your Honor. What's the court's plan in terms of the afternoon break? Are we having one today or not?
We're gonna, yes, we are probably about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the timing of where yours is, and no way rushing or slowing anybody down.
Is that good? Can you hear me? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
How was lunch?
Good.
Yeah, I'm tired of this lunch places around here, aren't
Yeah.
you? Yeah, well, I've been at Jimmy John's every day since we started. Ladies and gentlemen, first let me say I'm privileged to be here. I'm pleased that you guys have stayed around. Not that you really had a choice, but I am pleased that you stayed around and you are this jury will decide this case. I will tell you that not unlike most openings, this is, like Mr. Kemp said, a roadmap to what we believe this case will provide for you in terms of evidence. And I've always said that you get from this part of the process a general description of what's going to happen next. And so some of the details won't be presented here, but I'll give you a broad stroke, a broad kind of paintbrush of what we're going to do and what we're going to show you, both in the form of testimony and documents. So it's our belief that the evidence will show that both Real Water and Terribles are equally at fault for the injuries that all of our claimants have suffered, all of our clients. I will tell you that you will see through the evidence that while Real Water produced the product, without a seller, you get no profits. You make no money. We all know this. We can have a great idea. McDonald's at one point had 1 store. Someone came along, not to say I support the person who ended up taking McDonald's as big and making it as big as it is today. That person sold McDonald's, and now we have McDonald's all over the country. Terrible Herbst is the marketing arm, the promotional arm, the advertising arm of Real Water. And you will find out with the evidence in this case just how intimately they were involved in pushing that product. Now we asked during voir dire whether or not any of you had any problems at Terrible Herbst. I think Ms. Rojas asked that question. And Mr. O'Doul may have asked each of you whether or not you had experience, taste, bought anything in Real Water. Now, you all responded the way you did. I believe the evidence will show that Real Water was marketed in Terrible Herbst stores inside, at the gas pumps. They sold within 2 years over 370,000 bottles of Real Water. And despite selling all of that water for over 2 years of litigation, Terrible Herbst has denied any contracts, any communications, anything. They have denied any relationship with Real Water for over 2 years of litigation. These plaintiffs started this process in 2021. It has taken us a lot of work, a lot of effort to be able to present this case to you. We have taken dozens of depositions, and I spoke to you about depositions. We've hired numerous experts, all at significant cost, just to be here. And so when we ask questions about voir dire in terms of what's frivolous and what's not frivolous, let me tell you, it has taken an enormous amount of effort, resources to be here today. The evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that Real Water and Terribles were complicit in getting that product out in the market, enticing people to buy it, touting the health benefits of something that had toxins in it. And it's unfortunate that you all have to be here to decide now what's the value of someone's life, what's the value of months and days and hospitals. But we wouldn't be here if we didn't need your help. We wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be wasting your time if we didn't need you, this group, to make a difference. And we believe the evidence that we provide you during this trial will help you make a difference. Now, I said a few moments ago that for 2 years we've been in litigation. And it's actually greater than 2 years. And I also indicated that Terribles have denied their part in this for approximately 2 years. Let me tell you, and let me show you slide 28, please, Shane. This is our account. We believe the evidence supports this. The Terribles sold 371,326 bottles between May 2019 and May 2021. We don't have the records going back before then. It's my understanding, based on the evidence, that perhaps those records were purged, and we never got the benefit to see how many bottles of water Terribles sold between 2008 and 2021 when the recall happened. But suffice it to say, in over 2 years, that many thousands, hundreds of thousands of bottles. Next slide. I also want you to understand that despite having that type of impact on our community, Terribles decided never to test a single bottle, not one bottle of real water to determine if it was safe for consumption. Not a single one. Terribles didn't do what In-N-Out does. Terribles decided we're just going to sell because profits go before safety. They didn't do any field monitoring of the real water manufacturing facilities. They didn't visit one time. They didn't check to see if the facilities were clean. They didn't check to see what additives they were putting in the water, the conditions, nothing. They did absolutely nothing. They did no form of quality assurance or quality control of the real water product. Next slide, Shane. Now, this is the Executive Vice President of Administration of Terribles, Mr. Chris Kemper. And he's been in that position since 2018. He's been with Terrible Herbst for over 30 years. He testified as Terrible Herbst's most knowledgeable person, and he was deposed on October 3rd, 2023, just a few months ago, ladies and gentlemen. He verified Terrible's written discovery. Now, during voir dire, I explained to you what depositions are. Depositions, an opportunity for the attorneys to question a witness under oath, same oath you would get if you were sitting here in a court of law on the stand in front of this judge. And it carries with it the same penalties for perjury. You have to tell the truth. And he did also respond to the written discovery. I explained that to you as well. Interrogatories, requests for production of documents, requests for admissions. He responded and verified the truth of all of those documents as well. The evidence will show that he gave inaccurate, using nice words, perhaps stronger words, untruthful at a deposition, untruthful in responding to written discovery. Next slide, Shane. These are requests for admissions. And we'll start here because I don't want you, ladies and gentlemen, to necessarily take me at my word at this point. I want to show you some documents so you can see it based upon Terrible's own responses to written discovery. So, go back, I'm sorry, Shane, go back. So you can see this document is dated, electronically served December 30th, 2022. So a little more than a year ago. Actually, almost a year and a half, well, more than a year ago. Maybe 13 months. And you can see that this is Terrible Herbst's answers to our written discovery. And it's a request for admission set 1. Go to the next slide, please. And this is Mr. Kemper's verification of this document. And you can see here, he declared under penalty of perjury that these answers are truthful. As his signature, you can see it's dated January 3rd, 2023. So just more than a year ago. Go to request number 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you're dealing with requests for admissions, typically it's a question asking you to admit to a particular fact. So, for example, if you're in a car accident, I think I may have used this as an example during voir dire, we could send questions to the other side, there's a car accident, to the defendant, say, defendant, was the light red, would you admit that the light was red when you ran through it? And they'd say yes or no, admit or deny. So this is request number 3. And request number 3, and I'm going to approach it a little bit, says, admit that you did not perform any testing on any samples of the real water product prior to selling it at the ETT1 stores. And I know you heard this, but I just want to remind everyone, ETT is the DBA for Terrible Herbst. So it's the same company. Stores within the Henderson and Las Vegas, Nevada area in the years 2018, 19, and 20. And you can see all the objections, don't worry about those. But you see the answer, admit. They're admitting that they didn't perform a single test on a single sample for 3 years of this product. Next slide, please, Shane. This is request number 4. Admit that you did not conduct any independent, go up a little bit, Shane, so I can get the rest of it. I actually need to read the full number 4, Shane, you could. There we go, thank you. Any independent testing of the real water product or samples from it at any time. Now keep in mind, they were selling, Terrible Herbst was selling this product from 2008 all the way until it got recalled in 2021. Over 10 years, and they never tested. Not just in the 3 years we were concerned with originally, but never tested. Next slide, Shane. Request number 5. Admit that you did not perform any field monitoring of the real water company's manufacturing facilities. And we give the addresses. You guys probably recognize those addresses. The response, admit. Next slide, Shane. Number 6, admit that none of your employees visited the real water company's manufacturing facilities. Again, the addresses. Again, admit. Next slide, Shane. Now, these are interrogatories. A little different than a request for admissions. Interrogatories typically require you to give an explanation or information. It's not simply an admit or a deny. And again, you see the date, 12/30/2022. Go to the next slide. You should see the verification by Mr. Kemper, January 3rd, 2023. Go to the next slide, Shane. This is interrogatory number 4. It says, state whether or not you were provided any test results and or quality assurance documents pertaining to the real water product prior to selling it in the years 2018, 19, and 20, and if so, describe such document and state the person or entity which provided the same to you. Now, this question was asked because of something that Mr. Kemp said earlier. He spoke about independent auditors. So let's just say Terrible Herbst was cheap and decided they didn't want to spend the money to have an audit performed of Real Water. They could have simply requested from Real Water audits asked of them from others. Mr. Kemp mentioned the NSF audit. Real Water was audited by NSF. It's a independent auditing consulting company. And they found, and you'll see, the evidence will show, just how bad the results were of that inspection. Their scores in some of the most important areas of the inspection dealing with safety. They didn't even have a safety or quality control person at the time of the inspection in 2018. That's how bad it was. And I think Mr. Kemp indicated at one point they promoted the receptionist to their quality control person. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And Terrible Herbst sold that many products for that many years without a single visit, a single test, nothing. So, again, a bunch of objections, but the answer is no. They admit that they didn't do any testing, no quality assurance, documents, nothing. Next slide, Shane. This is interrogatory number 5. State whether or not you conducted any independent testing of the Real Water product at any time. Again, this is a follow-up to the request for admissions to make sure there's nothing we've missed. Is there some kind of excuse they're going to use to get around it? The response, no. Next slide. Number 7, state when you first became aware that there was a potential concern that persons drinking the Real Water product were experiencing personal injuries, including but not limited to liver injuries. March 16, 2021. That happens to be when they were asked to pull the product off the shelves. Next slide, Shane. Number 8. Describe your policy and/or procedures regarding testing, quality assurance, quality control, field monitoring, or site inspections of water which you sell limited to the years 2018, 19, and 20. Look at this answer. None. 0. Not a single policy or procedure related to quality assurance or quality control. Not one. This is the type of information that you should consider when you're deciding whether or not Terrible Herbst should be responsible for punitive damages. Because this is a blatant, conscious disregard for the safety of purchasers. When you do absolutely nothing for as many years as they've been selling that product. Next slide, Shane. Interrogatory number 9. State the name and job position of the persons responsible for quality control and/or product safety of the Real Water products sold during 2018, 19, and 20. Not applicable. That's what the response is. Because there is no one that they have, no one assigned to it, they put not applicable. Next slide, Shane. Now, these are requests for production of documents. Unlike requests for admissions or interrogatories, this is where you actually request a document to be returned to you. And these were sent to Terribles. They responded December 30th, 2022. And again, Mr. Kemper, the Vice President, Executive Vice President, verified the responses. There again is his verification under penalty of perjury, January 3rd, 2023. Next slide. Please, I didn't say please, I always say please, but it says, produce your policies and/or procedures regarding testing, quality assurance, quality control, field monitoring, or site inspections which you sell limited to years 2013 to 2020. So roughly 7 years. This is the response. After a diligent search, responding party is unable to locate responsive documents. Now, how do you not have a single page of documents related to your policies and procedures. Is that simply saying, I have no policies and procedures? There's nothing that we have that would lend itself to us checking the quality of the products we're selling, especially, in this case, of course, real water. This is all their responses. Next slide, Shane. Request number 5, produce all results of any testing that you've performed on a real water product at any time, and any testing of which you are in possession, including but not limited to testing by a real water company, by governmental authorities, or testing by other parties to the litigation. Anybody. After a diligent search, responding party is unable to locate responsive documents, which means that for over 10 years, they sold a product without requesting any test results. Even if they decided not to do it themselves, they could have asked for test results. And that's their response. I don't know how much more you would need to be able to come to the conclusion that Terrible Herbst had no interest in the safety of purchasers, turned a blind eye, and consciously disregarded the safety of purchasers. Next slide. Okay. This is Mr. Kemp. Throughout this litigation, Terrible's indicated numerous times that there was really no relationship between it and real water. It was simply selling a product. And didn't have anything really in terms of documents, in terms of procedures and protocols, anything to demonstrate what they did to ensure the safety of their customers. So we took his deposition, and we took his deposition in part to make sure that these answers that he gave us to interrogatories, requests for admissions, and requests for production was really what they appear to be. We wanted to confirm that, and that he stood behind those answers. Did you play that for me?
Did you also review requests for admission or interrogatories?
Yes, sorry, yes,
Both of those?
yes.
And that's, you might as well go through them quickly, just, and I may have some questions about them later, but if you flip to tab number 2, and it should be a document entitled Defendant ETT1 LLC DBA Terrible Herbst Responses to Plaintiffs' Request for Admissions, set 1. See that?
Yes,
Are these the requests for admissions that you reviewed in preparation for today's deposition?
yes,
And in reviewing these requests for admissions, did you believe that any of the responses needed to be amended or changed?
no,
Okay, so if you flip to tab number 3, and this should be a document entitled Defendant ETT1 LLC DBA Terrible Herbst Responses to Plaintiffs' Requests for Production, set 1, and take a minute to go through that.
yes,
And does this appear to be the request for production or the responses to the request for production that you reviewed in preparation for today's deposition?
yes,
And in reviewing this document, did you see any responses that needed to be amended or changed?
no,
And then if you flip to Exhibit 4, this should be Defendant ETT1 LLC DBA Terrible Herbst Responses to Plaintiffs' Interrogatory, set 1. See that?
yes,
Okay, take a minute to go through, but essentially the same questions. Does this appear to be the interrogatory responses that you reviewed in preparation for today's deposition?
yes,
And in reviewing these interrogatory responses, did you see any responses that you thought needed to be amended or changed?
no,
And then lastly, I'll have you flip to Exhibit 5, which is a document titled Verifications. And on pages, well, it's identified as 6, 7, and 10, but it's really, I think pages 3, 4, and 5 of the document. Is that your signature on these pages?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and that's verifying that the answers to the RFPs, requests for admissions, and interrogatories were true and correct to the best of your knowledge, right?
That's correct.
Thank you. So just so you have a clear understanding, that Mr. Kemper, Executive Vice President of Terrible, confirmed that those answers that he gave on that day, over a year ago, were true and correct. So you don't have to take my word for it. Next slide. This is a response to interrogatory number 6. I wanted to bring this out separately because I really want you to focus in on this. It says, state whether or not any of your employees had any communications with an employee of the Real Water Company in the years 2018, 19, and 20. And if so, state the name of the employees of each entity and describe the nature of the communications. The answer is no. Now, they sold 371,000 bottles of Real Water during that same time period, and they're saying there was not a single communication between Real Water and Terrible Herbst. Next slide. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence will demonstrate in this case the Terrible's answers and responses to written discovery, testimony of Mr. Kemper, as well as Mr. Breeden, who you'll hear from shortly, are inconsistent, untrue, false. Let's go to slide 52, please. This is Brian Breeden. His deposition was taken just a couple of months ago, ladies and gentlemen, November 3rd, 2023. This is his testimony. He says here, the question is, have you heard the name Brent Jones? And I think Mr. Kemp mentioned Brent Jones. Brent Jones is the owner of the company. His son, Blaine Jones, his wife, Amy Jones. And so the question is asked of Mr. Breeden from Terrible, have you heard the name Brent Jones? He says, I have not. How about Blaine Jones? No. Amy Jones? No. Anthony Randolph? No. Anthony Brown? No. Frank Casilgia? No. Keep going. Have you had any communications whatsoever with Real Water? I have not. Okay, have you been there since 2018, I think, right? Yes. Next slide. Okay, so the question is whether there's been any communications with any employee of Real Water 2018, 19, and 20. And if so, the name, and the answer is no. Do you see that in line 24? So what he's referring to, ladies and gentlemen, was the interrogatory. They were using that interrogatory with Mr. Breeden's deposition to say, hey, Mr. Breeden, this is what Mr. Kemper said in his interrogatory. And he's being shown that. So it says, do you see that on line 24? It says yes. Then next question, okay, we don't know if that's true really for you because you haven't done the email search, right? There's an objection, and the witness says, I don't recall meeting anyone from Real Water. No. Keep going, Shane.
And a friendly reminder, council, maybe a step back or two, if you don't mind. Thank you so very much.
You're
If you
welcome.
need to move that large, you can do that if that's in your way. You can see
No,
that?
I was just
Sure.
trying. There we go. How did this? Is this good?
That's fine. Thank you so very much.
Perfect. So we're past 24, okay. So line 15, I don't recall meeting anyone from Real Water. No, that's his response. And it says, okay, it says communication to, keep going a little bit more, Jane. To ascertain whether there's an email between you and someone at Real Water, we would have to do an email search, right? And he says, I mean, if you say so. Question, well, is there any other way you know that we can ascertain whether or not there's an email between you and anyone at Real Water? He says no. Next question. The same would be true. Go back. Thank you. The same would be true of the other employees at Terrible Herbst, correct? He says correct. He says correct. No one came to you at any time and said, hey, we need to search of all your emails. Response? No. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you will find, the evidence will be clear on this point. Those words, that sworn testimony, because remember, he raised his hand before he gave his testimony at the deposition, you will find to be untrue. you will find out that in fact he knew Amy Jones, that he knew Anthony Randolph. Amy Jones, again, being the wife of the owner of Real Water. Anthony Randolph being the primary marketing person from Real Water. Now, this is something you may hear, an excuse that you may hear sometime in this trial, that Mr. Anthony Randolph with Real Water in sometime in 2018 or something, became a consultant. But he continued selling Real Water to, or negotiating with Terrible's to sell Real Water at Terrible. His position went to consultant. His email stayed the same. He testified that there was no difference in what he did for Real Water before and after he became a consultant. That's the type of response we got from Mr. Breeden. And again, he's a former vice president of sales of Real Water. Next slide. Mr. Randolph testified that he communicated with Mark Walters, which is the vice president of purchasing for Terribles. You'll learn these names. There's only really 4 names from Terrible Herbst I think you'll learn them. One is Mr. Kemper, next is Mr. Breeden, Mark Walters, and maybe Brad Sexton. And he said he communicated with Mr. Walters via email, phone calls, Zoom, and in-person meetings. Next slide. Mr. Walters and Mr. Randolph established a game plan to sell Real Water products at Terrible locations. That's important, ladies and gentlemen, just because I said earlier, I wanted to show and demonstrate, I wanted to inform you of how close that relationship was, how one was tied to the other by marketing, promotions, commercials, everything Terrible did to put this product on the market. Terrible was supportive of the brand. They created the promotional materials and the advertisements. Next slide. Mr. Walters and Mr. Randolph created a price point promotion. Continue. Real Water gave Terrible a $1.50 per case rebate for all cases sold. Go right ahead. Mr. Randolph and Mr. Walters worked together on display boards, advertisements at Terrible's cardboard stickers, and ads at the pump. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen these at gas stations where you have the advertisements running right on the pump. When you're pumping the gas, there's somebody talking to you. There's coupons that you can get while you're listening to it. Push a button, you get free coupons, go in the store, you get free water. That was done at Terrible's for Real Water. And yet, you'll hear, you've heard already, through the written discovery, that they claimed there was no relationship, no communications. You would think that Real Water somehow snuck over to Terrible Herbst and put their commercials on their pumps or inside their stores, if you were to believe what Terrible says. And then here, this last bullet point talks about commercials playing inside and outside of the stores. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Real Water provided free home delivery to Mr. Walters as a token of appreciation. So they would send him free home delivery, Mr. Walters, and here's a copy of the statement that we were able to find in discovery. And you can see his name at the bottom, Walters, and you can see at the top, this barter payment. And yet, you saw that interrogatory where Mr. Kemper said there was no communication between Real Water and Terrible's. And yet, you got commercials, you got free water, you got pump and pour, which I'll tell you about, and they're selling 371,000 bottles and no communications. It defies logic and reason, ladies and gentlemen. Next slide, please. Now, Mr. Randolph testified during deposition that Terrible Herbst approved the Real Water advertisements. They advertised the Real Water products on their Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Again, here's a slide of it, so you don't have to take my word on it. You see at the top, I got it in the yellow box, TikTok. This is off of Terrible's social media platform. Next slide. Again, Real Water, Terrible Herbst, this is Facebook. Next slide. This is another Facebook, Terrible Herbst. You can see the hash, Terrible Herbst, right at the top. Next one. Instagram. This is Terrible Herbst Instagram. Next. Terrible Herbst approved running 30-second real water commercials. Now, I think it's impossible for real water to go to Terrible's, stick a 30-minute commercial or 30-second commercial in its store or on its pump without Terrible Herbst having some communications. Next. Here's the commercial. Could you run that, please?
Transform your body with real alkalized water. Real water is so advanced, it's beyond alkalinity. Real water is alkalized antioxidant water infused with negative ions. Maximize your body and mind's performance. And with a clean and refreshing taste, no other water can compare. It's no surprise that elite athletes and Hollywood's brightest stars choose real water. So do your body a favor and get real. Drink real water. You will taste and feel this difference.
That's just one. Now let me show you the other one.
Are you feeling sluggish, old, and tired? It could be because your body is dehydrated on a cellular level. Most purified waters are acidic and as a result may be rejected by your body. But it doesn't have to be that way. Real water is different. It is beyond alkalinity. Real water is infused with negative ions for ultra-cellular hydration. You will immediately notice the smooth, clean taste as you start hydrating the minute it hits your mouth. Real water. You will taste and feel this difference.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you really believe that that lady turned into the other lady after she drank that bottle of water. If you do, I got a really nice bridge over a beautiful lake I can sell you. But that was Amy Jones, the person that Mr. Breeden said he never had any communication with, didn't even recognize her name. And this is their commercial. The evidence in this case will show that Mr. Breeden, knew who Amy Jones was, knew who Anthony Randolph was, the person who interacted with them on all of these promotions, but denied, because that's what you do when you try to avoid responsibility and accountability. And that's why the evidence in this case is going to demonstrate how important the difference will make holding them responsible for getting it done. Next slide. This is the pump and pour program I was talking about or alluding to earlier, where you go, you start pumping, something comes up on the screen, you can get a free coupon and get free water or a discount on a product. And that was at Terrible. And we found that, by the way, we found that in discovery. And you'll see in a second the actual coupon. So this may, in the event you've ever been to Terrible Herbst, this may refresh your recollection of how this looks on the screen. Or you may have done it with some other product. Next, Plaintiff Myles Hunwardsen saw the real water commercial at the pump. Mr. Randolph said he saw it at the pump. Mr. Walters and Terrible Herbst were instrumental in real water becoming a successful product. Next. That's the coupon. So I don't know if you've ever seen one of those for any type of product, but this is what the coupons you could get at Terrible Herbst. Next slide, please. Again, I don't know if you've seen these kind of clause screens at Terrible's, but this is, it actually says at the bottom, pump and pour. Another way Terrible Herbst was making money, increasing profits by selling real water products. Now, I want to show you just how important Terrible Herbst is or was to Real Water's marketing promotion. This is Real Water's business plan. Not Terrible's, but Real Water's. This is straight out of their plan. It says Real Water's exclusive rights to the proprietary E2 technology. That's that whole concentrate that Mr. Kemp was talking about and how it's made, how they use it to make all the water. That's the E2 technology they're referring to. Extends throughout North America, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and include any real water that is exported from this territory. It talks about the E2 technology and how they intended to expand their market. So what I want to point out to you on this, It says here, with the E2 technology, Real Water's ready-to-drink brand of bottled water becomes a premium, enhanced water that falls within the function of beverage category. The functional and enhanced bottled water market was validated a few years ago when Coca-Cola purchased Glacier, which included the vitamin and smart water brands for a significant $4.1 billion, or $4.1 billion. Real Water is not aware of any other company that has a technology that is as effective as E2 technology, and is confident that the E2 technology is far superior in taste and health benefits to all competitors. Go to the next slide, please, Shane. Now, this portion of the business plan indicates that the company has also entered into an agreement to sell E2 technology in a 4-ounce concentrate version to Genesis Pure, direct sales owned by well-known health expert Dr. Lindsay Duncan. Genesis sales exceed 100 million annually. In addition to sales revenue, this relationship will create awareness of the E2 technology and should result in increased demand for the other products that have the E2 technology. Next slide. And this slide, again taken from Real Water's business plan, mentions Terrible Herbst and the impact that Terrible Herbst has on Real Water sales. It says online 30-second commercial. I highlighted that because for 2 years of litigating this case, over 2 years, Terribles has been adamant that no commercials were ever related to Real Water were ever on their pumps or within their stores. And it says here, a 30-second video commercial has proven to be successful for our targeted demographic. Using Google Analytics, the commercial can be pinpoint focused to our selected demographic. Also, the commercial is used for in-store and outside pump video display at various retailers. It is done particularly well at Terrible Herbst gas station chain in Las Vegas with approximately 100 locations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to compare that to what I showed you first. I showed you the interrogatory signed by and verified by Mr. Kemper saying that there were no communications, nothing. And here they are in Real Water's business plan talking about their commercials running at 100 locations. There is no way to reconcile what Terrible Herbst said in depositions, written discovery, with the evidence in this case. There's just no way. Next slide. Now this is Mr. Kemper again. And this is his deposition. And let's go to the next slide. And again, he was a 30B6 witness. Let me explain that a little bit. A 30B6 witness is when a company designates someone to be the person most knowledgeable at that company for certain topics. That's what a 30B6 witness is. So they designated Mr. Chris Kemper, the executive vice president, as that person on behalf of Terrible. Go right ahead. So during his deposition, he was asked, and were there any specific agreements with Real Water? No. Then he says, the question is, there's no written agreements as far as that distribution of Real Water to Terrible Herbst, right? He says no. Next slide. Do you have any shelving agreements? No. Next says, slide, there we go. Terrible Herbst is in the business of making money off the products that it sells. And then he says, we're in the business of selling the product. So that's the question. And that's his response. And then getting back to the NSF international audits, because this was asked of him during his deposition, and has Terrible Herbst ever reviewed a third-party audit like the one from NSF International? No. Again, I don't want you to take my word for this. I want to show to you the answers coming from Terrible Herbst's executive vice president himself. Next slide says, and fair to say, based on your answer to a couple of questions ago, you have never seen third-party audits that were done of Real Water's facilities? No. Did Terrible Herbst do any testing of Real Water product? No. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I don't know how clearer this could be, how clear this picture can be in terms of complete disregard for any process dealing with quality assurance or quality control or the safety of its purposes. Next slide, please. This is an email from Ken Rathall to Mark Walters indicating that they received reports of alleged health concerns regarding real water. Second paragraph says, please instruct your staff to pull the product off the shelves and hold it. The next slide, please. Matt Osa is also a Terrible Herbst employee. You can tell from his email address. And he mentions Mark Walters, Brian Breeden, and says to read a document below, an email below. And the email below, go to the next slide, indicates, suggests, this is from Mark Walters, indicating that they need to pull all product and hold for credit. After that notice, March 16, 2021, go to the next slide, Shane. Terrible Herbst failed to pull all of the product off the shelf. And we learned through discovery that at least 4 bottles of real water was sold after they were instructed to pull the product off the shelf. I don't know how much more you would need to know, given that before the recall or before they were asked to pull it off the shelf, they had 10 years of not testing. And then even after the recall, they still sold at least 4 bottles that we can figure out from the discovery we've been able to do. So this is, again, his deposition. And the question is, has Terrible Herbst ever requested a product supplier or manufacturer to provide customer complaints that the supplier or manufacturer... Go to the next, I'm sorry. Go to the next one.
This is a video, Mr. Parker. Would you like to play it?
Yes, please.
Has Terrible Herbst ever requested from a product supplier or manufacturer to provide customer complaints that the supplier or manufacturer received?
No.
Is there a specific number of complaints that Terrible Herbst uses as a trigger for an investigation or to suspend a manufacturer?
The answer is no.
What would it take to be in a complaint for Terrible Herbst to determine that it was going to suspend a supplier or product manufacturer from selling at a Terrible Herbst location?
Well, again, just like we did in this case, once we were made aware of the situation, we immediately pulled it and returned it.
Now, he says that they immediately pulled it and returned it. So there's no way they should have sold additional real water after that, given what he just said. Go to the next slide, please.
And it appears there's nothing sold in April of 2021, but it does appear there were additional 4 bottles of real water that were sold in May of 2021.
Yes.
Okay. And I think based on what I'm looking at, it looks like that would have been 1 liter bottles.
I don't see.
So if you
I'm
go
trying to connect the dots here.
If you go to the second page there of
This one.
and it looks like that first column at the top
Yeah, oh yeah.
is real water 1 liter,
Yes, correct.
and that appears to correspond with the 4 bottles.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea, have you talked to anybody about how 4 bottles of real water got sold in May of 2021?
I did not. And I don't want to speculate.
If I needed to talk to someone about the bottles that got sold, would that be Mr. Walters?
Possibly. That would be one of the people that I would go to ask.
So again, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. We found the document, we confronted him with it, and even after those bottles were supposed to be removed because of health concerns, they're still selling, at least from the information we were able to figure out, ladies and gentlemen. If you could, Shane, go to slide number 100, please.
What was the number, Mr. Parker?
Oh, 100, please. Doesn't seem like we went through 100 slides there. Now, these are all of our clients. Mr. Kemp introduced all of them, but he spent more time on 4 of the 5. I represent, in addition to Mr. Hunwardsen, Ms. Sosa as well. Go to the next slide. So, Ms. Sosa also had elevated ALT and AST, liver function test results. Next slide. She went to the hospital on those dates. She passed out, and I'll give you some more details about this. She passed out on November 3rd, 2020, leading to her first visit to the emergency room. She had the classic symptoms of someone suffering from acute liver failure. Ms. Sosa's story is a little different in that she started having problems 3 or 4 months, perhaps 3 months, before she ended up going to the hospital. And those problems persisted after she got released from the hospital. Ms. Sosa was starting to suffer from dizziness, lethargy, vertigo. She thought she had vertigo. And she lived in her house with her son. She's divorced. And she started feeling differently. Anxiety, nervousness, all of the things that you see before you. And she didn't know what was causing it. She had no idea. And she had a friend come and visit her. A friend from Colorado named Penny. And Penny also recognized that Ms. Sosa was not doing well. She could not figure out why. And while Penny was visiting Ms. Sosa, Penny started having the same or similar symptoms. Started sleeping, I believe Ms. Sosa will tell you, 16 to 20 hours a day. She couldn't figure out what's going on. Ultimately, Penny had to extend her stay because she didn't feel well enough to drive. Eventually she did, and she went back to Colorado. Penny ended up going into the hospital with also liver-related. Now again, Christina didn't know what was going on. She goes to the hospital. She doesn't know if she's been poisoned. She has no idea what's happening. She gets released from the hospital. She goes back home, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. She was supposed to pick up her son, and we'll go through this in further depth when she's on the stand. I want to give you some highlights. One day she was supposed to pick up her son from her ex-husband's house. And right before that, she went to the grocery store. She goes to the house and she passes out. This is what started her going to the hospital. She passes out. And she missed her time to go pick up her son. The ex-husband and the son come to the house and she is passed out. She doesn't know what's wrong. She just completely blacked out and passed out. They find food from the grocery store, from the car, all the way to the house, all the way to her place. They take her to the hospital. Again, they can't figure out what's going on. Later on, she has another friend visit her. That friend is also trying to figure out what's going on with Christina. Ultimately, Christina goes to the hospital again. Again, not knowing what's going on. She's asking people to test her for some kind of poisons, toxins. She has no idea what's going on. But she's still suffering from these same issues, these same symptoms, and they're getting worse. She finally decides to leave the house and stay with a neighbor for 3 months. Her son couldn't stay with the neighbor, so the son ended up staying with the ex-husband. But for 3 months, she's displaced, sleeping on a futon, trying to figure out what is going on with her life. She's a small business owner. She has an accounting company. She's by herself, a one-person company. She's missing work. She cannot figure out what's going on. She goes to ENT, ears, nose, and throat doctor. She schedules a doctor's visit with a neurologist. A toxicologist. She doesn't know what's going on. But when she moves out to the neighbors, she starts feeling better. And so eventually she decides, let me go back to the house. She goes back to the house, problems again start coming back. Symptoms start coming back. And then she thinks to herself, my son lives in the house with me. Why isn't he suffering the same problem? It dawns on her. She sees the issue with real water on the news. Her son didn't drink the real water in the house. She was the only one drinking the real water, and her friend Penny drank the water. She stopped drinking the water. Eventually, after spending thousands of dollars, she had her indoor air quality tested for mold. She had HEPA filters brought in. She did everything she could figure out to try to determine what was happening to her. All along was the water she was drinking. No one should have to go through that. No one. Especially when a $200 test could have prevented all of these plaintiffs from being here today. Just a little quality assurance, a little quality control. Something. Do something. Don't put profits ahead of safety. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I can't think of anything more important to life than water. You can live longer off of no food than you can clean, safe water. And we're here because of toxic water, made by real water, promoted and sold by Terrible Herbst without any regard to safety. Again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate your patience and your attention. And I look forward, both me, Mr. Kemp, and Mr. Pepperman look forward to presenting all the evidence in this case.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's probably a good time to get you a nice brief break. We'll come back at 4:15. During this recess, you are admonished not to talk or converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the trial, the voir dire process. Do not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial or voir dire process or any person or entity connected with the trial or voir dire process by any medium of information, including without limitation, social media, text, tweets, newspapers, television, internet, radio. Anything I've not stated specifically is also included. Do not visit the scene or the events mentioned during the trial or the voir dire process. Do not undertake any research, experimentation, or investigation. Do not do any posting or communications on any social networking sites or anywhere else. Do not do any independent research, including but not limited to internet searches. And do not form or express any opinion on any subject in the case. So it's fully and finally submitted to the time of jury deliberations. That, see you back at 4:15. Thank you so very much.